Are Mormons Christian? I am one, and the answer is, well, yes, but actually no. Hey guys, Saint Explainer here. On this channel, we explain Latter-day Saint things in conveniently pixelated bite-sized chunks. And as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or a Mormon on the internet, the most important question I have to answer is, am I Christian? And from my perspective, at first, it might seem pretty simple. I consider myself a Christian. I try to follow Jesus. The church has Church of Jesus Christ in its name. Therefore, I'm a Christian. This perspective raises some objections. In fact, most Christians you meet on the internet do not consider me a Christian. Well, why is that? It's because we're talking past each other on what does it mean to be a Christian. Well, if you ask me that question, I might say something like, well, a Christian is someone who believes in Jesus and tries to do as he said. In which case, both me and my detractors on the previous slide are Christians. But when you ask them, the definition is more like believing in Jesus and agreeing with certain ideas about him. Those ideas being that Jesus is God and God is Trinity, among others, which we'll get to later. Now, I do not believe in either of these two ideas, to which most Christians would say that that means I am worshiping a different and a false God and therefore cannot be considered Christian. And the reason I say that we're talking past each other is that if you ask people what it means to be Christian, they probably say things like believing in and following Jesus and how he died for our sins and whatever, things that I definitely agree with. But what they mean is also the Trinity. So that's it. The answer to Are Mormons Christian is a big fat it depends, which I'm sure is a really satisfying answer. But it really does depend on what definition you use for Christian. Now I am going to say here that as much as I like my definition of Christian, it's not the one that most people use, and that's okay. By the definition that most people use for Christian, I'm not one. And that's also okay. My religion is different from what most Christians are. And I'm not going to try to bully people into pretending that difference doesn't exist or saying that I'm something that I'm not. Which is why this is the meme that I used at the start of the video. Anyway, if you're just here to find out whether Mormons are Christian, then that's it. For the rest of this video, I want to argue two seemingly contradictory points. First off, why I disagree with the correct ideas about Jesus standard for who counts as Christian, but on the other hand, why my fellow Latter-day Saints should stop trying so hard to be seen as Christian by outsiders. Let's get into it. Is intellectual agreement with ideas about Jesus' nature necessary to be Christian? And I'm not even talking about the Trinity or Jesus being God specifically, just more broadly. And I don't think the Bible supports that. If believing the right things about Jesus' nature really was that important, then when he talks about how you need to believe in him, you'd think he would stop to explain. And other than identifying himself as the Son of God, he really doesn't answer questions about his nature one way or another. And if it really was so important to believe in the Trinity to avoid going to eternal hell forever, then you would think that Paul or Moses or someone would have explained it. But again, that doesn't happen. Independent of all arguments about whether the Trinity is true or what Jesus really is like, it just doesn't seem like the Bible thinks this is all that important. Which is probably why these ideas had to be figured out by getting everyone together to argue about it hundreds of years later. And the question I would ask is, where's the line? How wrong about God is too wrong? There's more nuance here than people might let on. For example, when most Christians are talking about the Trinity, they describe the Spirit as proceeding from the Father and the Son, and it looks kind of like this. But if you're Eastern Orthodox, the Spirit instead proceeds from the Father and not the Son. And if thinking the wrong things about God is equivalent to worship of a false God, then who's the false God? And if you think this is a triviality, the people at the time didn't think so. This is the reason the Catholic and Orthodox churches broke up, and when it happened, both sides condemned each other to hell. That was 1,000 years ago, and they still haven't got back together. And these disputes among Christians go beyond the Trinity. For example, if you are Oriental Orthodox, Jesus has one nature. Everyone else says that he has two. Again, who's the false God? And ultimately, I don't think there's any bottom to this. You can split hairs as long as you want over things that ultimately don't impact your life as an ordinary believer at all, which is why I think the intuitive definition of Christian is the one that we should use. Do you believe in Jesus? Do you try to do as he said to the best of your ability? If so, I think you're a Christian. I'm happy to recognize you as such. Anyway, let's move on to the last point I'm trying to make here. Just because I don't agree with the intellectual ideas standard, that's still the standard that most people use, right? And I don't think my fellow Latter-day Saints should be trying as hard as we are to be seen as Christian by other people, for a few reasons. First off, our religion has genuine differences with the rest of Christianity. All the ideas on the screen here are things we believe, and I'm pretty sure all of these have been condemned as heresies by the ancient Christian church, that you go to hell for believing any of these things. Second off, not only do they believe our ideas are wrong, but we believe their ideas are wrong. It's just a fact. And third off, the type of people who get on the internet to tell you that you're not a Christian, you're never going to change their mind, because the exclusion is the point. Christians can't say who is Christian, not only against the wider world's culture, but even within their own ranks. Remember those ancient heresies I talked about? They're actually alive and well among people who everyone considers to be Christian, and not just among the laity. Here's John MacArthur, who was one of the most influential pastors in the world, teaching something that is actually the exact opposite of what the ancient councils taught. Look, if you're a Latter-day Saint trying to earn a seat at the Christian cool kids table, what you have to understand is that table has all kinds of people sitting at it. People that the real Christians aren't thrilled about, but also can't do anything about. But because Mormons are one of the few minorities whom it is still acceptable to bully in the modern world, excluding us is finally a boundary that they can defend without getting in too much hot water or catching too much bad PR. So the exclusion is the point, and you're never going to change their mind. And look, not everyone you meet on the internet is a bad actor. There are some people who actually want to talk, and there are some people who are equal opportunity excluders. And I respect both of those positions. But your average Mormons aren't Christian bro on X, yeah, it's just not worth the effort. Though as much as I'm ragging on these people, this guy has a point. We are two-faced about this, and our doctrines are very clear. And I've been saying from the beginning on this channel, stop being insecure. This religion is awesome. And Christian. Anyway, this has been Saint Explainer. See you next time.